Hi 4G students, welcome to a new video, welcome to a new lesson for EPISD at home. Today it is time to do social studies, and yes, I'm talking about the Vietnam War that began in 1955 and ended in 1975. And I know you are thinking, another war involving the United States? And the answer is yes. Yes, guys, the United States got involved in this war like what is it, 50 years ago. But let me tell you that this war was really, really different because the outcome was really, really sad for the United States. Actually, the United States lost this war. Yes, you heard that well. The United States lost this war. But how? How did the United States lose the war when they had a powerful army? How did they lose a war when they were the best country in the world? Well, that's why I'm here. I'm gonna teach you everything about this war called the Vietnam War. Okay, so how did everything uh, happened? Okay, so before the Vietnam War, there was a conflict between the USSR and the United States. But who was the USSR? Okay, so after World War II, I'm talking about the year of 1945. Actually, there were only two powers. There were only two countries that had the power to control the world, and those were the USSR and the United States. But let me tell you that those two countries that I have here, this is the USSR and the United States, they were not friends. They were not friends, they were like enemies. And they were enemies because they had different ideologies, they had different types of systems. The USSR supported communism, right here, and the United States supported democracy. So they had different ways of thinking, which created a lot of problems around the world. And that is known as the Cold War. The Cold War lasted for more than 50 years just because of this, because the USSR supported communism and the United States supported democracy. So one day, when Vietnam, which is a country located in Asia, became independent, they were alone, they were by themselves, they didn't know how to create a new government, they didn't know what to do with the country. So, like in 1953, the USSR sent soldiers to Vietnam. Actually, they sent like most of them to the north. Do you see this blue part, this blue region? Okay, so they sent all the soldiers to the north because they wanted to teach them about communism. They wanted to create a communist government for Vietnam. And that's when the United States said, "Oh, you know what? I think that's not a good idea. If we let the USSR spread communism, they're gonna do the same thing to China. They're gonna do the same thing to India. They're gonna do the same thing to Japan, and we are gonna have a chaos. We need to teach them." That's what the United States said. We need to teach them about democracy. We need to teach them the good way of having a government. So we are gonna send soldiers to the south, and we're gonna create a war against the north because we are gonna show them that we are really powerful, and we're gonna show them that the democracy is better than communism. Guys, do you think that this was a good idea? Well, I think it was not a good idea, because the United States wanted to teach other countries how to control themselves, how to have a government. So at first, right here, this was a mistake. They got involved in a country that they didn't know, and I think they did it because they wanted to show power and because they wanted to show the USSR that they had the best army in the world, and that they wanted to show that democracy was better. So this how the Vietnam War started in 1955 and lasted for 20 years, guys. For 20 years. It ended in 1975 with sad news because the United States lost this war. Okay, so I have a little presentation for you that I'm gonna show you that is gonna give you more details about the Vietnam War. So please sit back and enjoy. And like always, you have this presentation in Schoology. So if you want to review the information, you're more than welcome to do so because all of this is in Schoology. Okay, so this has a lot of like text, but I'm gonna try to make it short and easy for you. Okay, so the Vietnam War. Okay, so you right now you have like an idea of what this is, right? Okay, so here we have the map. Vietnam, like we said, is located in Asia, and the north was occupied by the USSR that supported what? Communism, right? And the yellow part was for the United States that supported democracy. Okay, so we said that this conflict was developed because of the Cold War. We know that the two countries that had power at that time were only two. Those were the United States and the USSR. The USSR supported communism and the United States supported democracy. So the United States was effective in limiting communist influence in Europe. But the spread of communism in Asia led to the United States to become involved in a civil war in Vietnam. Involvement in Vietnam from 1950 to 1973 proved to be America's longest and most controversial war. So, when they saw the USSR invading the North, that's when the presidents of the United States at that time were Truman and Haynes Over. They said if we let the USSR to do this to Vietnam, they're gonna do the same thing to all the countries in the world. So we, as the United States, we need to stop them. We need to show them that communism is not good. We need to intervene. We need to send soldiers to Vietnam. So, like we said, Vietnam became independent in 1954. They didn't know how to control themselves. So that's why the USSR took the North, and that's why the United States took the South, because they were helping them to create a new government. And the president of the South was Ngo Dinh Diem. So the United States supported this president because he believed in democracy. And the president of the North was Ho Chi Minh, who supported communism. The USSR supported Ho Chi Minh. Okay, and those were the flags. Okay, so the goal of the United States there was to show them that democracy was good and that communism was not good. So they said, the United States said, we're gonna do whatever it takes to show them that they are wrong and that we are the ones that have the reason, right? That have the good reason, that have the good government. But let me tell you that in Vietnam, everything was so complicated. When soldiers arrived to Vietnam, like they didn't know what to do, guys. they just got there and they didn't know who was the enemy, because this war was not like the war that where you see two armies, like where you actually see two armies. No, when they just got there, uh the enemy didn't have any uniforms, and they were thinking that the let me go back to the map. The United States was thinking that the enemies were only located in the north, but actually not. There were some people in the south that didn't want the United States there, so it was really hard to know who was the enemy. Plus, the the land there was really really difficult for the United States. It was actually a jungle. uh, this was a new experience for soldiers. They didn't know the land. And also, they didn't know about this. The enemy um in Vietnam didn't fight like using the popular tactics. They used like tunnels underground to fight. So it was really hard for the United States to see where was the enemy. So you can see that the enemy had everything underneath. They had kitchens, they had hospitals, they had shelter, they had everything underneath. And then they knew really, really well their land, that they created this kind of traps for the US soldiers. They were called booby traps. So this was devastating for the soldiers, because a lot of soldiers lost their lives here because they didn't know the land. Okay, so the war started in 1955, right? And in 1965, people in the United States, like students, teachers, started to see that nothing was actually happening in Vietnam. Like the United States was not winning the war, they were actually losing the war. They were just sending soldiers and soldiers and soldiers and soldiers for no reason, and many of them were killed, and this was going out of control. So there were a lot of protests during this time, telling the US president, please stop the war. You are fighting in a country that doesn't belong to us. You're fighting for no reason. You are fighting where our soldiers don't know what to do. You better take them out. So you can see here some of the protests. Uh, and have you seen this symbol before, the peace symbol? Okay, so they created this symbol back then in the Vietnam War to show that they wanted peace, not war. And everything here is in the United States. Those are students and teachers wanting to stop the war. And here's a poster that, like, it's telling to the president, we want to get out. We don't want to fight in Vietnam anymore because we don't know who's the enemy. They are putting traps everywhere. It's really hard to fight in the jungle. We don't know what to do. We are just losing and losing soldiers. So please, we want to get out. Okay, so Nixon, who was the president at that time, he promised to stop the war. He said, okay, I think we don't see any progress. I think this war is not a success. We are gonna return all the soldiers back home. But actually, he didn't. What he did, he actually sent more soldiers, but he sent more soldiers now to Cambodia and Laos, which are two countries right here next to Vietnam, because he also wanted to take control of those two countries, but he never said that to the Congress. And when the Congress knew about this situation, they got really, really mad at Nixon. That actually he got impeached for this. Impeachment means that he lost his job as president. Actually, he left office before all of this because he knew that he was going to lose his job as president because he was doing things without telling the Congress. And the protest gained more power. Now it was the year of 1970, and soldiers were still in Vietnam, and the North was winning the war. The North was looking strong, and the U.S. soldiers were just desperate. They didn't know what to do over there. So finally, in 1973, the soldiers that were in Vietnam returned home. And what they did is that they signed like a treaty of peace with the North. Okay, they said, okay, so we are gonna leave the country, but please let the South by themselves. And the North said, okay, yes, if you go back home, we are gonna let the South be by themselves, and we're gonna stay here in the North. But as soon as the United States left, the North took control of the South. They didn't respect the Treaty of Peace. What they did, they took control of the whole country. That's why we say that the United States lost the war, because as soon as they left, the North, which supported communism, spread communism all over the country. So the United States did a lot of work for nothing, because as soon as they left, the North took control of all the country. So here we have the numbers, guys. Just look at the numbers. 3.3 millions of US soldiers served during the war. Just imagine. It was a period of 20 years, and 58,000 soldiers were killed, 303,000 were wounded, and 15% were diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder after the war. Guys, it was a tragedy for the United States. And also, as soon as the war ended, Nixon left the office, but actually, the Congress passed a new law that is called the War Powers Act. This limits the power of the president during the war. Back then, the president had the power to control the army, and because of Nixon doing his own things over there, now the Congress limits the power of the president. So now, like Donald Trump, he doesn't have the power to control the army or declare war by himself, which is good. Now you need to ask the Congress before you go to war, because Nixon, he was doing secret things over there. And that's pretty much it, guys. That's the Vietnam War, which is, it's not a good part in U.S. history because we lost the war, but I think we can learn too much about it, right? One of the things that we can learn is that it's not possible to tell people from other countries what to do, right? I think that's why people from Vietnam got mad at the United States, because they were thinking that the United States were telling them what to do. That's why everyone got mad at the United States, and the result was negative. The United States lost the Vietnam War. Okay, guys, if you have any questions, please let me know. And today we have a video conference with Ms. Rojas at 1 p.m. Please Have a nice weekend and see you on Monday. Bye bye.